Hi, it's good afternoon, morning, still morning where I'm at actually, to everybody. Today is Friday, June 24th. I'm actually in Seattle, Washington, visiting the Smoky Point here this week. We'll give everyone a couple of seconds to get logged on here. And again, as we do so, just the safety message. We're grateful for everyone that can tune into this and participate and send any questions. But if you're driving, please don't watch this. It will be recorded and saved, and you can watch it another time. And just as a reminder, if you can't make it but you want something discussed, and we'll watch this broadcast later, send me an email, with the question, and if it's a question, you want more of a public forum, then I'll answer it, on this, and get logged in. So people are jumping on. Melissa, hi. Riley's on. Tracy Veneer, hi. Jack McFadden, hi. We'll give everyone just another second here. Michaeline, yeah, I did get a haircut. Apparently, I don't get haircuts often enough because everyone's commented on my haircut. It's I don't know why, but I just don't like getting haircuts. It's almost like going to the dentist to me. So it's I go get a haircut 2 or 3 times a year, it seems like, and I probably should do it more often. But yeah, appreciate it, Michaeline. Well, I guess you're not saying it looks good, but it's Joseph LaPuma, hi, to you, Jake. Both Jakes say hi. That must mean Jadu. What's going on, Jadu? David Ransom, Richmond, Kentucky. Richard Veneer, hi. We'll go ahead and get started here. There's some things that I just kind of want to, address. There's various rumors, gossip, that kind of stuff. And, like I said, send them in, and I'm happy to. We've had some drivers ask questions about supply chains and products and so forth is overseas. It's interesting how much of products that trucking relies on is comes from Russia and China. I mean, it's I don't recall the compound that goes for tires. Some like 70% of the compound that we need for tires comes out of some remote mining or whatever in China, type of thing. So we really are a global economy for better and for worse, and what things are impacted in Russia and Ukraine, obviously is having an impact in the rest of the world in Europe. Well, DEF, for those who kind of understand, what DEF is mostly made out of urea, which it burns at a really high temperature, and efficiently, and that's what burns off a lot of the waste, that's created from diesel. Well, I've read various numbers. Some 40% to 70% or something like that of urea is generated from Russia. So there's been some concern that there's going to be, potential shortage of DEF. We've reached out to various suppliers and vendors, and while keeping an eye on that, we're not overly concerned about a DEF shortage, at this time. But obviously, if that becomes a bigger concern, we'll certainly let you know. But the ratio of DEF to diesel is not even close, of course. So we don't need as much DEF as we do diesel, but we certainly keep an eye on that. So that's that is a good thought. Good question. Again, I'm going to try to keep up with the comments and questions here, but hold on a second. Let me look at the questions here. Michael, you're a hairdresser for 35 years. Well, we can meet in Joplin, and I'm happy to let you whack at my hair, I guess. So Aaron Siegel, hi from Tropical Island. Where are you at, Aaron? Or Topsail Island? I don't know where Topsail Island is. Where is that? Bob Pinson's on. Riley's saying we're cutting out a bit. It might be my internet connection, but let me know if it's, you're still having issues. And Joe Younger's on. Hi, Joe. Okay, so also wanted to let you know, and for those of you who are doing DoD front, you've probably already seen and felt this, but there is extra scrutiny at DoD facilities, in particular military bases. A lot of it has to do, with a lot of the mass shootings, around. Several military bases have had issues with that, in the past several years. So there's going to be a lot of scrutiny. Just be prepared for that. Just you definitely don't have any guns on your truck. I mean, you're just not going to be allowed on base, and you're probably going to have some big issues if they discover it, type of thing. So just be aware, of what their concerns are, and where that's coming from, and obviously, that can be a sensitive, topic of how you protect yourself, and those kind of things. But it is the DoD, as a customer that will just be having that extra scrutiny. So just be aware of that. The new trucks we've got coming in, I think the count is about 90 new trucks that we've got coming in the next few months. It's been delayed a bit, but we're just grateful to have them. It's so much of the supply chain, holding things up is, most of the truck is built, but there's just some widget or some whatever, that have been waiting months and months, for it to be completed. So we're excited to get the 90 new trucks in, and I think this count doesn't sound right, but I have on my notes here 40 new trailers coming in. I think it's more than that. I must have written that down wrong. So we have some new equipment coming in, which would be fun, and exciting. Just a note, just FYI, on the tractors, we're going to be changing the tractors and getting away from the drum brakes on the tractors, where they're all going to be the disc brakes. So that should be a pretty good upgrade, to the braking experience. The trailers will remain drum brakes. So as you do your DVIR and your vehicle inspections, you still kind of have to be aware of that. The disc brakes, really shouldn't require as much inspection, as the drum brakes, do. But just know that that's one of the things that's going to be, happening with the new tractors, that come in. So, Kathleen Burrell, hi. Michaeline, yeah. Well, if we meet in Joplin, we can do it. I mean, it's and then Bob Pinson, any increase in the owner-operator deadhead. So that is a topic of conversation. Bob. Here's what I would tell you, though. Okay, I mean, it's the owner-operators are doing tremendously well. Rate increases. The fuel surcharge, is done tremendously well. Deadhead is a part of our business. I mean, it's, Tri-State, we run 350, 400 company trucks. And, we eat the deadhead on that. That's just kind of the cost of business, the deadhead, right? So, we do have, a bit of an incentive program for the deadhead, for owner operators that they can participate in or not, type of thing. But again, it's not, given where the overall rates are and fuel surcharge, everything, we are, discussing that, keeping an eye on that, but it's not something that we're overly focused on, right this minute, to be completely candid. Speaking of well, I lost my train of thought here. Joseph LaPuma mentioned that there's a bunch of new trailers in SoCal. It's, a lot of times they get staged in Southern California, but they'll get distributed, to various parts. I think we send a bunch to Indiana and so forth. But so I'm not sure what the distribution model will be, but a lot of them are staged out of there. Still doing Cascadias and T680s. The 90 trucks that we're looking at on this batch. Hold on a second. I think they're mostly the Cascadias and Volvos. It's the Volvos are generally the preferred truck for the teams, and then the Cascadia tends to be a bit roomier. The KW is interesting. I mean, it's when I got into trucking 10 years ago, KW is a much stronger brand than Freightliner. In fact, Freightliner, nobody wanted one. I mean, freight shakers, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know the KW's, and I'm not the best to speak on to this, but you guys would know better. I don't know the KW's done a really good job of staying as modern as some of the other manufacturers. So we've got some things that we look at. Frank would speak better to this, and Rob and breakdown and everything. But some of it's supply chain. Again, what trucks are available, and some of it's going to be what the best equipment are these days. So the 90 that's coming in are Volvos and the Cascadias there. So. Bob, no, yeah. Keep asking, and like I said, I mean, we'll be pretty transparent, and I mean, but it's don't mind the question at all, for sure. So, anyway, yeah, Tracy and Joseph, you guys seem to agree with the Volvo. So anyway, the disc brakes. Most of the new tractors going to have those disc brakes. Trailers will remain the drum brakes, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. Okay. The next subject. So we're looking at, as you guys know, I struggle with, doing the Facebook Lives, of whether it's on and broadcasting properly and that kind of stuff. Riley Porter and I are looking at some different platforms and technologies, to do the Facebook Lives. If you guys have recommendations and suggestions, send it to us for sure. But one of the things we're looking at doing is doing more of a private forum. Right now, I mean, we know that our competitors can watch this, our customers can watch this, which is good. Former drivers, prospective drivers, can all watch this, and as we get some questions, from family members sometimes and everything, which is cool. But there's also some challenges. Sometimes we like to share some things that we really can't, in a public forum type of thing, but we could in a private forum. So these we wanted some feedback on whether it's a good idea or not to do these Facebook Live meetings and stuff on a private versus public forum, or if you even care. I mean, obviously we give all of you guys, drivers and office staff and everybody, access to the private group, and then we can set up some way where if somebody wants to come in but they're not employed by, but their spouse or customer, and it just has to be referred by a current driver or something like that, we can certainly look at all of that. But give us your thoughts if you have any concerns that we're not aware of in doing that. But that's probably a transition that we'll look at doing here. So okay, let me catch up on messages again here. Joe, wish they would put us in Volvo. These KWACs, keep going out, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know the KW's done a good job of keeping up as well as they should. So you're going to see more and more Volvos and Freightliners. Especially the Cascadias have been great trucks. So we're excited about those. Coming in. Riley reminds us, Brake Safety Week is coming up in August. So hopefully a lot of these trucks will be in the fleet by then. Richard Joplin has a bunch of new trucks. We've got to give them detail. That, like I said, we're getting more and more of them in, and then there's still some stuff that me outfitted and decaled and some registration and that kind of stuff. And it always takes a little bit longer than we think it should, but we'll get sorted out there. How many miles are solo trucks running before we switch out to another truck? Volvo is becoming The garage queen, I've not heard that term, at 348,000 miles. Yeah, so we normally flip the trucks, as warranties run out, typically 450 to 500,000. Now, we've had some, again, the supply chain and ability to replace trucks, we've kept trucks for a bit longer than we otherwise normally would, but just because we can't replace them, as we'd like. We also look at into taking into consideration, obviously, how much time it's spent in the garage, and so forth. So it's, but typically, we're going to about 450, 500,000 is when we're looking at getting them out of the fleet. Andrew, would Discord would be a more secure service? I think Riley's looked at that, but yeah, send us more info on that, Andrew. Melissa, Volvos are the best for teams, and in your opinion, and that seems to be the general consensus. There is some disagreement, but hell, we're not going to agree on everything. So, okay. Anyway, so any concerns about moving to a private forum type of thing, let us know. But that's a transition we'll probably look at making over the next week or two. And two more things I do want to talk about. We need more drivers eligible to go to Canada, and we're going to be talking about that more, in the next week or so. We'll be, we used to have, 80 trucks, 80 teams, that were Canada eligible, and we all understand, some of the limitations that Canada has put in that has made that difficult. But our customers are needing us to, to figure this out, and so there's some conversations coming up, that we'll be having with all of you guys, about going into Quebec, in particular. The list of things that we're needing in order to go to Canada is, first of all, if you've got a DUI or felony, that's probably going to make you ineligible, to go. There's ways that you can get a minister clearance, but it's not an easy process, but there is a way, but it's a challenge. But otherwise, you're going to need a passport, of course, or border permits, type of thing. Passport light. For Canada, still requires vaccination. Quebec explosives permits. Those kind of things. And so we do need to increase, the amount of drivers, both owner operators and company drivers that can service those customers that have those needs. So we'll be talking more about that, in the coming week here. Richard saying they're cutting out again. Yeah, I apologize. I don't know if it's an internet thing or not, but it's not sure what I can do to adjust that here. The final thing I want to talk about is, some of you drivers were at the lodge a few weeks ago, when we kind of had we had some Dasky folks in, and some nicer weather, and we had a barbecue, at the lodge. And at that time, we unveiled, Roadmaster Group values and mission statement. And we want to get that to all of you, and we'll get it emailed out, to everybody. But in the next week or two, Riley's helping us organize this. We want to have a conversation about what is the values that Tri-State Roadmaster Group has, how it impacts all of us, and so we'd like to invite each of you to participate in that conversation. It's probably going to be led by Vonda and Cheryl and myself. But we're going to get that emailed out to you. Check JD's weekly updates. We'll send that out. But if you don't get it for some reason, feel free to reach out to me or Riley, and we'll get it forwarded to you as well. But it's just as the world changes, we want a statement of who we are and what we want to be. We're not perfect, and it's very aspirational, some of this of where we want to be, but hopefully we can all get on the same page of what's important to us, and so we want to share those thoughts, that we have, with each of you. So anyway, Richard and Tracy, yeah, I mean, yeah, again, it's, appreciate your, willingness to, to at least consider, those things. So, again, it's our customers that, that needs freight moving. The political landscape is what it is. I mean, it's, not, not everyone agrees with it. Not everyone's comfortable with everything that's required, to go into Canada, and so forth. But, for those of you that are, we need you, and our customers need you. So we appreciate it. Anyway, it looks like my internet is telling me to sign off here. I want to say thank you to everybody. We appreciate you. I mean, it's, the work we do is important. We're grateful for, each of us, as co-workers, and, the opportunities that we have to serve in our various capacities, the company. Hopefully, each of you feel, valued and contributing, to the greater cause, and individually, it's, I'm just grateful for you. So anyway, we'll talk more in the coming days and weeks, and everyone have a great weekend. Thank you. Not even sure how to turn this off now. Yeah.